Hello everybody. So this video is entitled Stretch's Success is Underrated, because I cannot understand why MSTR and why STRC are down today. It makes absolutely no sense given the quality of the call, the quality of the presentation that we got yesterday, and really the insane guidance. That was my video yesterday. Sorry about the sound. I didn't have my microphone turned on for some reason yesterday. But the guidance he gave, double the Bitcoin in guidance, right? 1.6 million probably Bitcoin coming up, doubling the Bitcoin on MSTR's balance sheet for MSTR shareholder. That's outstanding long-term guidance. First time I hear him say that. Talked about BTC derivatives potentially being okay. Not only selling Bitcoin, but also selling derivatives, i.e. selling calls on the Bitcoin bag in moments of peak. We had a new sailor with new strategic information, very relevant strategic information. I cannot possibly understand how the stock is not up. Or I guess I can, because it is the nature of this market. The short-term movements in this market make very little sense. For example, in my portfolio, it's getting uncomfortable. Nebius, almost at $190. You know, I've been covering Nebius since the beginning, right? I've been in this stock since like $30, even less than that. So getting uncomfortable. Lots of stocks in AI, by the way, are getting uncomfortably high, right? If you look at AMD's performance, Nvidia is maybe the one exception that I'll make. I think Nvidia is fairly valued. I don't think it has nearly run nearly as much as some of the other AI names. But AI is getting overheated. Someone asked in the comment section, asked me yesterday what I think about AI. I think AI is going to mean revert a little bit. It's getting overheated over the past few weeks. We went from valley of despair to exuberance in a matter of 3 weeks. That's the nature of this market. And when you have very, very high quality news on STRC and on MSTR, for some reason, it struggles to get back to the peg. It struggles to get back to 100. And this is what I want to highlight in this video. There's been a narrative shift. So now the new narrative is capital gains fund the dividend of STRC. There's been a lot of FUD attack against STRC. Mainstream YouTubers saying, it's a Ponzi, calling it a Ponzi, right? People who don't understand, they're like, how do you pay the dividends on STRC? Well, Sailor, by changing the extreme focus, on Bitcoin hodling, by changing that focus to we can sell the Bitcoin, we could potentially sell it, and then, he goes on, we could potentially sell it to fund the credit dividends, to fund the dividends. So if he goes on CNBC, like it just shuts down the bear argument. It shuts down the bear argument. The whole, you may remember the quote unquote Laura clip. Well, but if you never sell the Bitcoin, right? You may remember that interview. I think that was a Bloomberg interview that went viral. That has changed. Now he's selling, I could potentially sell the Bitcoin. If you want to know what I think he's most likely not going to sell the Bitcoin. But just because he says now that he may sell Bitcoin to actually pay the dividend, that just shortens the narrative entirely to promote STRC in the capital market and to make STRC very appealing. So yesterday's was STRC's day. And for some reason, we still have no peg at 100, despite Bitcoin getting very near to 83K. Despite that, the market continues to make no sense. It made no sense to the downside. It makes no sense right now. And for AI, if you want to know, I think a lot of AI stocks are getting overheated, especially Nebius. Nebius is getting ahead of itself. That's kind of what I see. I see a lot of value in MSTR right now. The price of MSTR right now is just low. It's just too low. That's kind of what I think. Anyways, let's talk about STRC really briefly. The success of STRC. So you can see, talking about 3 million retail accounts, beneficiaries, as he calls them, more than 3 million holders of STRC out there. And you can see it has integrated all of the main platforms like Schwab, Fidelity, Robinhood, Morgan Stanley, E-Trade, SoFi, and even Vanguard. Saylor talking on the call about how Vanguard is typically not a pro-Bitcoin company whatsoever. I think they were very late to have a Bitcoin ETF. Do they even have a Bitcoin ETF? I don't know, but Vanguard, very popular in the FIRE movement. Even they hold STRC for their clients. Yeah, of course, because Vanguard has a lot of people who use that platform for their retirement planning, and they're like, okay, STRC is very interesting, 11.5%, right? Retail investors make up 80% of a preferred, which, as he said on the call, is unprecedented for a preferred. It's unprecedented for a preferred. Talking about corporate treasuries adopting STRC, some of them having nothing to do with Bitcoin, like Prevalon, which is an energy plant company, or like a power company, so nothing to do with Bitcoin, and they adopted it, STRC. And you may remember that conference, right? That was 2 months ago, the conference that Saylor participated in, where he talked about. That was his conference, right? That was the conference thrown by MSTR. He talked about a few private companies. There were a few private companies on that stage actually holding STRC on their treasury. Why? Because it's a much easier conversation to have with a CFO, and you don't need the approval of the board. If you buy Bitcoin, you probably need the entire approval of the board. If you need to buy a preferred instrument for your cash reserve, that's probably a quick conversation with the CFO, maybe the CEO, right? So it's a big deal, actually, and that's why he said STRC is actually Bitcoin for corporation. That's STRC, that's Bitcoin for corporation, stable Bitcoin. Also, Saylor mentioning on the call, and I agree with two of these statements, talking about how TradFi innovation has happened, and I've pointed that out before, like 21 shares, for example, that's Europe listing STRC, and I think he talked about yet again about the looping and people borrowing to invest in STRC. Perhaps eventually some instruments on the riskier side may get to more than a 20% yield by layering a layer of borrow, by having a carry, some level of carry. That's going to be a TradFi innovation that's going to come. You're going to have ETFs who are going to want to borrow maybe 30%, maybe 50% of the value and increase the yield by having a carry. That's coming up. And some of these ETF innovations, right, we have also an ETF that's going to have both STRC, SATA, and hopefully a lot of the treasury companies also adopt the digital credit model so that we can really get into credit. So that's one point, TradFi innovation. But he mentioned his surprise at the speed at which crypto native protocols, right, what he calls staking networks, right, the speed at which these staking networks have actually adopted STRC and built product in STRC. He did say that the velocity of innovation in crypto native networks in DeFi, right, and we're talking about Binance Chain, Ethereum, Solana, what he calls the staking network, the speed at which they've adopted STRC is actually pretty stunning, and I entirely agree with me. We're not talking about with me. Of course, I agree with me. I agree with him too. Like, we're not talking about small amounts. Like, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars of STRC tokens, of STRC preferred shares that are owned by these protocols and turned into tokens and being tokenized, right? And that's a very big deal. I also mentioned I think STRC is going to come on Hyperliquid, which I think is going to be very interesting, because there's already STRK on Hyperliquid, right? And if there's STRC on Hyperliquid and some people leverage it up, right? STRK on Hyperliquid, you can do 5x. So again, and the carry trade, people are going to tell you, oh, this is going to end badly. Well, the carry trade is a very accepted practice in finance, by the way. I mean, I'm still waiting for the Japan carry trade crash. Like, how many years ago was that? I'm still waiting for the financial market to collapse because of a Japan carry trade, right? Japan's raising interest rates. They're just unwinding the trade, closing the trade over time. And how many videos did you have back then who were like, oh, you're going to have a crash because of a Japan carry trade? Carry trade is an accepted method of trading. And so that's incorporating the system. And lastly, I'll conclude with this. Strategy being the number 2, think about it, the number 2 issuance, STRC being the number 2 in both PFXF and PFF. So the preferred ETFs, the preferred income ETFs, have it as number 2. And by the way, some of the preferred ETF actually own also the other preferred. So if you look at how much digital credit is going to incorporate the natural credit, the normal credits space, I mean, this thing is like a virus for Bitcoin. It's literally a virus for Bitcoin, integrating both into the digital system, the digital finance system, and the traditional finance system. So I could not be more pleased for this call and about this call. And I will try to cover something else tomorrow. I'll make a video about something else tomorrow. But over the weekend, there's many more things that I have to talk about related to MSTR. So I'll talk about it. And like I said, the market is attention driven. Today, the market is sending its attention towards AI. And so today it's all about AI. You have NVIDIA up 5%, Google up 3%. That's just the nature of the market. Very short attention span. That's what the market's paying attention to today. But I am definitely not ignoring MSTR. Pretty insane call in my view. So anyways, this was not investment advice. This is not financial advice. This is only entertainment. I'm hoping you are entertained. Please like, please subscribe, follow me on Patreon, follow me on X. Thank you for watching and have a wonderful day.